BLM activists have taken to the street once again in protest of police brutality, and the name that they are screaming this time is Takaya Young. Let's talk about it. Guys, before we get into this video, please like and subscribe. I want as many people to find this channel as possible so you know what to do. Now, we're going to talk about a situation that is continuing to unfold here, and it is the death of a young woman by the name of Takaya Young, who is 21 years old. She was pregnant, and she leaves behind two children, a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. I'm going to get into the incident here. Some on the internet are calling this a modern-day lynching. Others are saying what the police officers did in this case is completely justifiable, given the circumstances in this situation. Now, 21-year-old Takaya Young was at a local Kroger in Columbus, Ohio. A Kroger employee accuses Takaya of stealing alcohol and then flags down two police officers who are in the parking lot of the Kroger to come and deal with the situation. The only footage we get in this instance is body cam footage from the officers that shows Takaya already in her car when officers are confronting her. Now, the officers come, two of them, one at her driver's side window, one in front of the car. They tell her to get out of the car on multiple occasions, and I presume that she can hear that they are telling her to get out of the car. She does refuse to get out of the car, starts to accelerate forward into the officer who is standing in front of her, and then is subsequently shot by said officer. Now, we're going to go through the body cam footage, so just a warning here. This is just for analysis purposes.
Out of the car.
7 back in service, 1828.
Get out of the car. Then get out. No. Then get out.
Get out of the car.
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 Shots fired.
Shots fired. Stop the car. Stop. Stop. Stop the car.
Now, her car does continue to accelerate, presumably because she does not have control over her body after being shot, and it does hit the Kroger grocery store. I just want to point out that this whole situation is very tragic. You have a young woman, 21 years of age, who has passed. You have her unborn child who has passed. Now you have two kids, 6 and 3, who are left without a mom. And you have two officers who have now been part of an altercation that has led to somebody's death. And I can only imagine that they did not go to work that day looking for the circumstances to make something like this happen. As far as my thoughts on the body cam footage, it is very murky and muddy, and how anybody could have a definitive view or judgment on this or be taking to the streets in protest of this actually blows my mind, when it is quite literally very difficult to decipher who exactly is in the wrong here or what's justifiable. All I know is that I feel this situation could have been avoided. How could it have been avoided? By complying with the officer's directions and instructions. If a police officer is quite literally shouting at you to get out of your car, you should get out of your car. You should listen to them. And especially when it is over something as little as stealing alcohol from a grocery store. This feels like something that could have been easily resolved, where nobody's life had to have been taken. Now let's talk about the officer's action in this case, and specifically the one that chooses to use his firearm. If an officer is standing in front of a car and that car starts to accelerate, there is the idea that maybe his life could be in danger. And if your life is placed in danger by a suspect or a perpetrator, maybe it is justifiable to use your firearm. Now, many are going to argue that the police officer could have moved out of the way of the car, that it was moving quite slowly. They could have gotten the license plate of Takaya Young and went and engaged with her later down the line. They could have followed her in a car-based pursuit. And you know, all of these things are reasonable things to think about. I think at the forefront of police officers' brains should be, how do I de-escalate this situation? However, in watching this video, I personally find it very hard to decipher what would have been the proper course of action in this case. And if I cannot decipher what the proper course of action is in this case, I don't know how anybody from the public who is watching a 30-second body cam footage video could decipher exactly what should have went down in this case. More so than that, I cannot figure out how hundreds of people could blindly take to the streets calling this an act of racism. It leads me to believe that it fits a certain narrative, right? White cop, black victim, white cop, black perpetrator, whatever you want to call it in this case. And as soon as people see that, their emotions are immediately engaged. They immediately want to call this an act of systemic racism. They immediately want to call for defunding the police or Black Lives Matter or screaming say her name, because that's just what we do these days. And we've done it in nearly every single instance of police brutality that follows this pattern of white cop, black perpetrator. Michael Brown, Eric Garner, George Floyd, Ma'Khia Bryant, Takaya Young. These are all names that circulate when we think about this narrative of white cop, black victim. Now, I do want to mention that in response to this, the police officer responsible for the shooting has been placed on leave. The other police officer is back at work. And I think that's justifiable. Take some time to actually look into the evidence in this case, try to decipher what was right, what was wrong, and what was justifiable, and then we can get back to a conversation about what should or should not happen to this police officer. All I know in looking at this video is that I feel this could have easily been de-escalated had Takaya Young gotten out of the car and complied with officers' instructions. And I urge all of you who may or may not ever find yourself in a situation like this, please comply with the instructions of police officers. Now, I have not found an article yet that outright states whether or not Takaya Young actually stole alcohol from this Kroger, so that's a hard thing to figure out here. But I urge all of you, if you're ever in a situation like this, and let's be charitable and say that Takaya Young did not steal the alcohol from the Kroger. If you are being accused of something you did not do, please comply with law enforcement before you start talking about whether or not you did or did not do something. Please do get out of the car, listen to them, have a conversation with them about the situation at hand, because if you choose to continuously escalate that situation, guess who has more power than you do? In this circumstance, law enforcement officers. And guess who can escalate to the furthest extent? Law enforcement officers. So I think this is common sense. Do not drive into one of them with your car. I don't care if it's slow or fast, it doesn't matter. If you are placing yourself in an antagonistic position with law enforcement, you can expect that they are going to respond to you antagonistically. And still, with all of this information readily available, most of our common sense still intact, BLM protesters are taking to the streets and screaming the name Takaya Young. Here's the video. How anybody could have this strong of an opinion on the body cam footage that we all just saw together and the situation that we all just saw unfold, it blows my mind. And they're screaming no justice, no peace. What is justice in this instance? Is it justice to be able to, drive your car into a police officer and not expect something to happen in return? That's not to say that I think she deserves to die or that I think that there was no possible way these police officers could have de-escalated the situation. I don't feel comfortable making that call, and nobody should feel comfortable making that call after watching that video. You all know that I used to be a really avid supporter of Black Lives Matter. I used to see videos like this and immediately feel the same impulse that probably all of those hundreds of people in the video I showed you felt. That we should go to the streets, that we should say these people's names, and that we should hold police officers accountable. But in this instance, I don't know what accountability looks like. But I do know that upon watching this video and looking into some of the details when it comes to this altercation, that this is not a modern day lynching by a slave catcher, as many would like to call it. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this incident. Who is in the right? Who is in the wrong? I believe that Takaya Young should have simply complied and that we probably could have avoided this entire situation. Do you agree with me there? Disagree with me there? And would you call this an act of racism? And if you would, please tell me exactly why. I will be reading your comments to see exactly what you guys think about this because, as I said, this is muddy waters for me. And with that, I guess, like, subscribe, click the notification bell to be notified every single time I post a video for you guys, which is every single day. And I can definitively say that I hope to never have to review footage like this in the future. But I imagine it will continue to happen. Bye, guys.